Thanks everyone for being here. I'm so excited to have our next session in the How Good Innovation series today. Thanks for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this discussion as a way of introducing one another. If our audience members would like, they can put their name, where they're based. If you would like, you can put the role or the company where you work. And that way we can get to know each other a little bit, even though we're not going to have the chance to introduce ourselves to one another. My name is Leah Wolf. I am currently in Los Angeles, California, and I'm the head of regenerative education and content here at How Good. I'm so excited to be speaking with our two panelists today. First, we have Felipe Villela, who is the founder and CCO of reNature, and we also have Gaëlle Le Gélard, who is the design manager at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So we're going to be talking about the integration of regenerative and circular economic principles into procurement strategy and how that might help improve and inform organizations' environmental and social impact, and also make their supply system more robust. So just to run through a quick agenda for our time together today, we're going to finish up our introduction. We'll have 40 to 45 minutes of conversation with our panelists. And then finally, we'll open it up for a Q&A toward the end with the speakers before we wrap up right at the top of the hour. So as we continue our discussion today, I'd like to invite the audience to put any questions that they might have for our speakers into the chat. I'll do my best to get to them and then relay them to our panel. But I look forward to all of your engagement. And without further ado, I am going to open it up to our two panelists. Gaëlle, would you like to start? I'd love to hear just a quick introduction, a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the organization that you work with, and maybe just a quick kind of idea of your sustainability journey or your circular economy journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Wow, that's a great question. So hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here and having this conversation with Leah and Felipe. I lead our design work in the food initiative at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So for those who don't know us, the foundation is a charity based in the UK, but global charity whose mission it is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. Maybe we can, I'll talk a little bit more later about what exactly I mean by a circular economy, we mean. But in the food team, what we're exploring is what does a circular economy mean for the food system? And more specifically, in the theme of today, what does it mean for procurement? What I focus on is, so I have a design background. So how do you design food products for a circular economy? What does it mean? And sustainability journey. So as I said, I have a design background. So I've always been kind of wondering, what is the role of design? You know, I know I will never be a CEO, but then what is the role of design to help decisions maker make the best decisions? And I worked for a consultancy for McKinsey before, and I had went on many projects on different sustainability topics. A lot in the food system with FMCGs and retailers, actually. And then I bumped into the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is quite famous in the circular economy world. And I think they had a real understanding and a hunch that design had an absolutely key role to play. So I jumped in to help them define what it is on food, actually.
Amazing, thank you. And How Good and the foundation have worked together before. I believe that How Good provided some data for the big food redesign report, which was fantastic. If any of you on the call have not had a chance to check it out, you absolutely should. It is inspired work. Did you have a hand in that, Gaëlle? That report?
Yeah. I mean,
wonderful work.
Design is key in that, so definitely. And yeah, I mean, How Good has been absolutely instrumental from the beginning, not only on data, but like thought partnership, helping us frame more ideas and go deeper into the thinking. It's been fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. Felipe, would you like to give a quick introduction of yourself and reNature and your journey?
Absolutely, Leah. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to see everyone here. Also meet Gaëlle. I mean, we also have contributed to the food redesign paper, so it's great to see How Good and reNature always finding cross work together in these streams. Yeah, so it's a big pleasure to meet all of you. I'm Felipe. I'm from Brazil. Have a background in sustainable agribusiness, working in regenerative agriculture the past 10 years, and founder of reNature, which is a Dutch organization working on mainstreaming regenerative agriculture across the globe. The reason why I co-founded reNature 4.5 years ago was mainly because coming from a farming background, I have been always traveling across the Brazilian agricultural landscape. And once I got to the Amazon rainforest and I saw this massive deforestation for logging industries, mining, agricultural, conventional agriculture practices from soybean to cattle ranching, I was terrified by how we are managing our natural resources in such a destructive manner. And that's how I started engaging more and finding solutions towards including nature and forest ecosystems in agricultural practices. That's how I started learning more about regenerative agriculture and agroforestry. And I saw the huge potential and also a lot of scientific data kind of like showing the success of these practices. And since then, I have been finding the most efficient ways that we can potentially scale that across the globe and make it mainstream. So reNature has 4.5 years, and we are finding always partners to scale our impact to make sure we can have an inclusion of nature in agricultural landscape design. So really happy to be here today and having this discussion with you guys.
Thank you so much. I'm so interested to hear more from each of you about the design aspect of your work. I think that it's something that's so important, but often flies under the radar in the larger discussion of food systems. And so I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit more. To start out, I usually like to ask people, what does regenerative mean to you? And that could mean regenerative agriculture or regenerative systems or regenerative business. But I think that there is no one set definition of regenerative, right? And so I think it's important to hear from all different aspects and all different stakeholders in the system what regenerative means to them. So Felipe, if you want to start out talking a little bit about that, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Leah. Thank you so much for this question. Indeed, so regenerative for us means basically us mimicking nature. So it's basically using nature's design to actually produce our food, but also any other source of raw materials that can come from soil which is rich in terms of nutrients, in terms of carbon storage, in terms of water infiltration. So it's really about understanding, observing natural processes. And so it's much more process-based agriculture rather than an input-based agriculture, because we tend to think that we always need external inputs like chemical fertilizers or even biological inputs to provide NPK for soil. But for us, we understand that regenerative agriculture is a way that we can use nature to actually have a more self-sufficient and empower farmer with knowledge to have a more steady and reliable income and productivity also over the years. So regenerative, of course, comes from a regeneration as an umbrella. But if we're talking about regenerative agriculture, we see it as a way to mimic nature and natural processes to design agricultural systems.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Gaëlle, would you like to add to that? And also maybe you could talk a little bit about circular economy and what that means to you and the foundation and kind of, maybe circular economy 101, really quick for anybody on the call who may not be familiar.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I completely align with Felipe's definition of regenerative. I think it's around, enriching, nurturing, enhancing. I think what I love, just like one thing, and we're probably going to talk about it during the discussion, but one thing I love about it is the richness, because it has to be different everywhere, because it's so place-based. So talking about regenerative outcomes is something we're trying to really, rather than practices, that we're trying to talk about and look into, because just looking at the outcomes, you will know whether the soil has been regenerated, the water and air quality has been improved and the biodiversity has been enhanced, etc. So circular economy, I think maybe I need to start with the system we're in today, which is the linear economy, the opposite of it. So it's a system where we take resources out of the ground, we extract them, we make things, we use them for a very short amount of time, and then we waste them quickly. So we call it the take, make, waste economy. A circular economy is a little bit the opposite. So you take that line, put it into a circle, and it's based on three principles. So eliminating what you don't need, so eliminating waste and pollution. Circulating products and material for as long as possible. So can you reuse things? Can you repair them? Can you refurbish them? Can you compost things, upcycle, etc. And so eliminate, circulate, and the third principle is regenerate. So regenerate natural system is at the core heart of a circular economy. What does it mean for food specifically? It's about rethinking the ingredients that come into a food product, and rethinking how these ingredients were grown. So what that has as a consequence is it means radically looking at your ingredient and product portfolio and thinking, can I integrate more diverse ingredients? Can I integrate ingredients with lower impact, like perennial crops or agroforestry? Can I upcycle? Can I use upcycled ingredient? Can I make sure everything is regeneratively produced?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'd like to hear from both of you. I know that you have both done some work together. reNature contributed to the food redesign report, and I'd like to hear a little bit, now that we've kind of learned a bit about our perspective on regenerative agriculture and also the circular economy. How do the two interact, and what is a future of regenerative agriculture and the circular economy working in concert look like? Is it something that, are they sort of mutually exclusive? Do they need to work together? Are they inherently going to work together in your vision? I'd just like to hear kind of, about what your vision of the future with those two things working together might look like. And Felipe, if you want to take it to start, that'd be great.
No, perfectly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a huge relation between a circular economy and regenerative agriculture in many ways. From the perspective of like we reusing also the inputs that we can actually generate through soil. So, for example, we're working with Nespresso, in which all the coffee waste that is being released, we reuse it for the coffee farmers as a compost as well. So basically, we are kind of bringing back the waste from consumers, but also from their own facilities, and reusing that back to the farmers that are growing coffee for Nespresso, in which they are now in transition towards regenerative. Because composting is one of the key elements for regenerative agriculture to scale that. And of course, like we use as much as possible plant species to provide enough biomass and organic matter for the soil. However, we do use composting and other sort of biostimulants to improve soil health. And the circular side of the things is basically really finding key inputs that can be reused so that we can bring back to soil. And that happens in also other forms. Just for example, with carbon, if we are using plant species diversity, we're actually bringing that carbon back from the atmosphere to the soil. So, those are more intangible ones, but, we're talking about natural resources, circular economy. There's also carbon, there's also water, holding capacity of in the soil, just as like soil nutrients also cycling through the root systems and so forth. So there's different forms of circularity in regenerative agriculture from an intangible perspective on the natural resources and the chemistry between the elements of nature, but also in terms of the more tangible ones, which is the the waste materials, and also the waste materials in general that can go back to soil.
So it sounds like you're saying, let me know if you agree, but like truly regenerative agriculture is maybe inherently circular. Would you say that that's kind of what you're getting at?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also like part of a whole indigenous and ancestral knowledge that has been always there, in which, indigenous communities in the Amazon, a lot of people tend to think that the Amazon, it's 100% nature made, but actually indigenous community, they were also doing interventions to actually improve the health of that forest ecosystem, and even planting species by looking at how birds, they actually spread the seeds over the forest. So mimicking nature, the forest, makes the indigenous community learn on actually how to reuse the resources from the forest abundance to actually improve the health of that particular ecosystem. So it's really inspiring to see the connection between circularity and regenerative agriculture as a whole, from the learnings from our indigenous communities.
That's amazing. I think that often, I mean, twofold. I think often the regenerative agriculture space is very dominated by white faces, even though, this is indigenous ancestral knowledge. This is not new information that's been discovered by, the sort of white cohort of regenerative agricultural space currently. This is something that goes further back. So thank you for bringing that point forward. And second of all, I think it's really interesting. I think often when people talk about the indigenous knowledge related to regenerative agriculture, something that I had never heard before was this sort of forest management side of things, where it's not just like letting the forest grow unfettered and taking from it what you can, but there is this interaction, there is this, humans are a part of that ecosystem. So anyway, thank you for bringing light to that part of it. Gaëlle, I'd like to give you the opportunity to also talk a little bit about, so we're thinking that for something to be truly regenerative, it is inherently circular. Do you think that kind of goes the other way? Do you think vice versa is also true?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that exactly when Felipe, you're talking. I think they're kind of weirdly, or not that weirdly, nested into each other. So one, like if your goal is regenerative agriculture, then circular economy will help you reach that. If your goal is a circular food system, then regenerative agriculture will be a huge pillar of it. So they kind of go hand in hand and need each other. If we want, so I mean, I'm sure everybody in this call knows that the food system is responsible for a third of greenhouse gas emission today. I think if we manage to combine circular economy and regenerative agriculture, we can make it, instead of not only not degrading, but make it a force of regeneration. It has this power to, like, today it's a big part of the problem, it can be a huge part of the solution. And I loved what you were asking, like, but what does that future look like? I think what we would want to see is a food system where, instead of bending nature to produce food, which is what we're doing today, food would be designed for nature to thrive. So food would be designed exactly what Felipe was saying, like what does nature do? What does nature need? Can we make sure our products are designed so that we use the ingredients that are needed in these different places? So that would mean a future where there's a much greater variety of ingredients in the product recipes. For example, can you design around all the ingredients of a silvopasture? Can you make sure you use all these ingredients in your products? Maybe there's also a future where you have like new buying models with farmers, where you have longer contract terms. Like you need to rethink the whole system really, for it to become this force of regeneration, but it has this power inherently.
I think that that rethinking and redesigning the system is certainly the theme of our session today. We've been talking already about sort of the push-pull between the influence that private companies can have on their own ingredients, their own supply system, their own, sourcing choices and procurement. And then also there's sort of this larger systemic overarching challenge. I think that some might argue that regenerative systems and a capitalistic economic system are fundamentally at odds with each other. How do you and your organizations view the interaction between those two, and do you think that they can coexist? And I'll let whoever jump in for. Oh, Felipe, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Leah. Indeed, yes, they can coexist, and I think we should use the existing economic model as a vehicle to get where we aim to get in terms of the proper systemic approach where we all want to be. However, and for that to happen, we need to also use the existing ways of communication with reaching the mass and farmers who are so resistant to change to actually get there. And that's why the indicator of economic performance is a key drive for large-scale transition in a very poor environment of agriculture we have today. So like once we do monitoring and evaluation of projects in regenerative agriculture farms, a key indicator is the economic performance and also the carbon one aspect, because those are the ones that are more being kind of requested from the industry at the moment. Yes, of course, we want to think more holistically and include biodiversity, water, social impact, and so forth, and we should. However, we should also recognize that in order to get where we aim, we need to use the tools we have to actually drive the change faster, because we're talking about the speed of regeneration, which is currently happening. So in order for us to exceed the amount of regeneration to pass the degenerative practices, we need to use the same communication tools and communicate with people who are so distant from the the ideal system that we want to all be. But so this is kind of how we reNature try to push, and that's why we work a lot with also some large corporates who are so also distanced from the getting 100% regenerative. But that's how we believe we can actually speed up the process of reaching regeneration at scale. So, but indeed, I mean, we need to constantly improve, but also constantly give push this agenda to be more holistically and think of all the also other indicators such as biodiversity and so forth, because biodiversity will become a second environmental asset just after carbon. And so this is, pushing the agenda to actually have a true cost accounting system where regenerative products is actually cheaper than the the conventional products. So in order to get there, we need to really speed up the process of regeneration. That's how I kind of perceive, but of course, it's a whole larger discussion than this on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it is so large, so complicated, so many moving parts, our three organizations, I think they sort of act as kind of connective tissue, right? Between ideas and action and regenerative and maybe capitalism, I'm not sure, it's like all of these different parts of the web that it's really exciting to kind of be in the in-between spaces with great thinkers like you guys. Gaëlle, do you want to talk a little bit about this as well?
Yeah, maybe I go a little bit philosophical. You stop me if I go too abstract, but I was thinking about, I think maybe the problem is not capitalism, maybe the problem is the linear economy. So coming back to, I think the linear economy is definitely at odds with regenerative systems, because the problem with the linear economy is that it has this inherent extractive philosophy behind it. So, we take, and we give nothing back, except in the form of waste that we can't actually, like waste that is actually that we can't reuse. Like in nature, there's no waste, right? So we extract value here and then we move it there, and that's where it stays. It never circles back. So I think in a circular economy, which again is regenerative by design, it's an economy where the value truly circulates throughout the system. And okay, being even more, if I was thinking about the circle, it doesn't have a beginning or an end. So no matter where you are in the value chain, we're all simultaneously giving and receiving the value throughout that circular chain. So I think, yeah, in essence, the linear economy and this extractive mindset is what we need to change, not necessarily the entire capitalist economy.
I like that a lot. Just a quick thing, because indeed, like it's about giving back what we have taken away. So it's not about the the economic model, or like the capitalism. It's really about actually us creating a society where we can really balance and have a balanced ecosystem. And in order to get there, we need to give back. And the circular economy, it's all about that. So I really like what you said, Bill. Yeah.
Thank you both. I know that's like a big question, and I think you did a great job of addressing it both philosophically and practically. So thank you for that. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you both face and your organizations face in communicating to consumers and to the average food purchaser the benefits of agroforestry and circular economy, or regenerative and circular economy, because I think that this is one of the main challenges that we consistently come across, right? Is like, these are pretty complicated topics. They're definitely understandable, but it takes a certain amount of education. And so I wonder if you could each talk a little bit about the way that you go about that communication, that education piece.
Yeah, that's a very good one, Leah. It's indeed a big challenge. It's actually funny, but it's easier to communicate that towards uh, companies in general than actually consumers. So it is something we need to really be very smart to think on how to bring that message across consumers. One, because there's a huge gap, like between us and the products we use. Where is the cotton coming from this shirt that I'm using? Where is the coffee that I'm drinking in the morning coming from, and what's the impact of that? So if people, they don't relate what they're consuming to where it has been produced. So there's a huge distance, and people then tend to not really care, or they tend to not really be selective once they buy. They have a decision purchase power when they go to buy a product. So how can we connect on that? We're trying to use some key artists that can potentially send the message away. So for example, with the coffee project we're doing with Nespresso, what happened is that there was a really famous artist here in Sao Paulo, where he has drawn in a huge building in Sao Paulo the coffee farmer, the female coffee farmer we're working with, drinking that coffee and showing the whole like kind of coffee behind with avocado tree giving the shade, which is like really amazing and stunning, because then you can really bring art to actually communicate the real necessity for us to invest in a more sustainable and regenerative future. So I think art has a huge power to do that. I know many different examples. For example, there's this artist in the Netherlands called Dan Rozenhard, which he creates artificial intelligence in big cities to show for example, the impacts of climate change that can happen in that particular city. So he did a whole kind of smog experience in Beijing in the past, to people really feel like what can actually happen to their health over the long term. So I think art is a really effective way to communicate what we are all doing. However, we need multiple solutions, and that's not only art. So also science-based, it's also can be effective in that sense. Some facts to kind of also prove to consumers that actually the impact of buying a product that comes from a regenerative farming is much more beneficial for them. So there's the whole karma thing, which is also happens in once the consumers that are buying. So I think there's multiple ways, and I think art has been the most effective one we have seen so far in our experiences.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I was actually, as I was brushing my teeth this morning, I was kind of thinking to myself, you know, these concepts of regeneration and circular economy, they require like a certain level of imagination, right? Like you're asking people to imagine a future, to imagine a world and imagine a system that's totally different than the one that we've been experiencing for the last several hundred years when we think about like industrialized agriculture and the worst effects on the planet that we've had so far. And so I wonder, Gaëlle, if you want to talk a little bit too about some of the ways that you get people to break out of their sort of day-to-day understanding of food system and the economy to think bigger and be a little more creative, be a little more imaginative.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something I think a lot about as a designer. I think one of the I'd love to do like two things: answer that question and then answer also the question on circular economy, because that's also quite challenging to communicate. So, but the first one, I think what we've done in the report is that we were like, okay, we can't see products that we would want to see in the supermarket in the future. They don't exist yet. So instead of explaining to companies and showing a lot of numbers, this is where you should be going. Can you please create products? So we say, okay, what if we created these products? So we actually worked with food designers called Alpha Food Labs, and we created what we call speculative products, so products of the future. So we have 4 products: a line of cheese from silvopasture. We have cereals that are wheat and peas intercropped. We have upcycled cookies that are made only from upcycled ingredients, and we have potatoes that are which varieties are like much more resilient and pest resistant. So that was a really good way for us to, instead of trying to describe, to just show and tell. And I mean, we went to COP, I presented the report at COP, I brought that's what I opened the speech with, is these products. Like that's the thing that people just really get it. And a lot of companies are like, oh, can we build these? Can we make them happen? Oh, where can I buy them? Like there's a huge power in actually showing the future that we want to see, which we've seen, like it just resonates with people. They just like, food is such an emotional thing, right? So people they just get it. They like, suddenly you tell the story in such a much more powerful way, which I love. And if I can go back to the circular economy, it's interesting because both regenerative agriculture and circular economy are very complex concepts that require this big systemic thinking. And I think at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we talk to consumers, but mostly we talk to practitioners, because they make the key decisions. And ideally, in our world, consumers would have no bad choices. They wouldn't have to work so hard to figure out which one, should I take the organic from the other side of the planet that is in plastic, or the local that is non-organic. Like that work should not have to happen. It should be only good choices. So our work is focused mostly on the system and how we change the system. And circular economy is interesting because it's been growing. The awareness of circular economy has been growing more and more, but the image is quite narrow still. Quite often it's about packaging or it's about waste. And I think our vision is much broader than that. It's about regeneration as much as it is about recycling waste. It's as much about packaging as it is about fashion and finance and food and all these other topics. And most importantly, I think it's about that. That's where the design comes in. You're hearing my little nephew in the background, by the way. It's about solving the problems at their source, not only dealing with the waste. So making sure, if you have a leakage in your apartment, are you going to start mopping the floor, or are you going to turn off the tap, right? If we focus on waste, we're just mopping the floor and the leakage continues. So the circular economy is a lot about closing the tap and redesigning things, going upstream, as we say, and to the design phase, to where the decisions are made that will define most of the product's environmental impact. So for food, that's where product designer or product developer define the taste and the look of a product, but also how much is going to cost nature. Like these decisions are made at that moment. So through the choices of ingredients and through the sourcing of these ingredients. So I think what we really want is to shift the circular economy understanding from it's a waste agenda to it's an upstream design decision agenda.
Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, How Good is very much focused on helping companies make better sourcing decisions, because 70 to 90% of a product's environmental and social impact happens on farm. It's based on where it's from, and it's based on how it's grown and the type of ingredient. And so in talking about these sort of upstream solutions, procurement teams and sourcing teams, who are the ones who are ultimately executing these kinds of decisions that have a huge impact across companies' portfolios, they are the ones who are ultimately going to decide whether, not only organizations meet their ESG goals, their overarching goals, but also, the amount of positive or negative impact that these products are going to have. So all that is to say, from a procurement perspective, because this is procurement in a circular economy, what are steps that teams can take to move toward a more regenerative and more circular sourcing model in your experience? Felipe, if you want to start with this one, you're welcome to.
Sure. Thanks, Leah. I forgot to mention one kind of inspiring way also that we have been communicating to our consumers was we created through reNature Foundation the Humans of Nature, which is kind of like a Humans of New York version for farmers who are regenerating land. It's really, really nice because we're kind of really sharing the stories of these farmers, like showing their faces, what do they produce, why they are regenerating the land, so really the inspirational side, which is nice because consumers are actually kind of hearing the stories from people who produce their own food. So I think this is also a good way to kind of connect the food and farmers with the consumers. So it's quite nice. Just wanted to mention that. And then so how we are kind of interacting in terms of the buying and the procurement side of this initiatives is basically by actually coming to an agreement where we really show the potential resilience around regenerative agriculture towards procurement teams in the corporate side. Because we, for example, had a 30% yield decrease last year in the coffee farming in Brazil, mainly due because of intensive frost that affected the yields dramatically. And the prices of coffee went up, and a lot of coffee companies, they had a huge impact in their sales for that. And procurement teams had to kind of be concerned about the future of harvest of coffee. And I think a very effective way is to kind of really show the economic benefits of adopting regenerative agriculture towards them, so that they can make better decisions on purchasing their raw materials and crops from farmers. Just as this example of coffee, but we have multiple global agricultural crops and commodities being affected by climate change. And I think if you kind of show them, okay, you have a climate resilience gap in which a coffee farmer who was producing conventional monoculture coffee farm, it had a 30% yield decrease, while a regenerative had zero impact on intensive frost. So if you add that to the equation, then the procurement team of this corporate will see, okay, actually we want to have a steady, reliable supply. So if we want to have that, how can we kind of incentivize farmers to actually have a more regenerative system? So that's why also I think insurances, they play a role to also mitigate the risks of farmers and also ensure supply for these procurement teams from corporate. So I think there's a whole kind of risk management, decision power from between the procurement team to deal with the farmers who are being highly impacted by climate change. So I think it's it's a design, again, system change that also needs to be addressed.
Thanks so much. Gaëlle, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I love what you said, Felipe. Totally agree. I think to what you were saying earlier, Solia, procurement has an absolutely key role to play, if not the key role. It's yeah, I can't stress that enough. I think, and what gives me a lot of hope is a lot of people that we talk to in many companies, a lot of the procurement people that we talk to seem to really understand the urgency. So it's very nice to see. But I think the big realization is when you realize that your choices shape agricultural landscapes directly. They will define whether regenerative agriculture will be profitable for farmers or not. I mean, an easy step to read our report. It's available on our website. I can send the link at the end. We go into a bit more detail in terms of concrete steps you can take. I think it depends a little bit on your role, but if as I was saying, going to the design phase of the product, both innovation or renovation, if you're reformulating product, it's also back to the drawing board a little bit, the design phase, and shift your thinking. I think you're already amazing at creating delicious products. And you can take this as a new creative challenge, like start with the needs of nature. Can you design your products accordingly? And also a super important point is better sourcing of current ingredient is not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. 60% of what we eat comes from 4 crops. That will not lead us to a regenerative agriculture. So in a regen farm, you have intercrops and cover crops and crop rotations, and so you're going to have a lot more ingredients each in lower quantities, but a lot more diverse. And all of these crops need to become what we call cash crops, to be viable for the farmers. And these farmers, they need to have trust that there will be a market for the ingredients. So on one hand, your product development teams need to integrate these ingredients in their recipes. And on the other hand, you as a procurement need to establish new dynamics with farmers. Can you have a closer relationship with them? Can you support them through the financial and technical means? I talk a lot about new buying models. Can you say, I'm going to buy all the output of your farm, or I'm going to collaborate with 2 or 3 brands, and together we're going to buy all the outputs of the farm. So because we're going to need these agreements and this collaboration. And I think ultimately it's about building enough trust and security for farmers to engage in a transition that will take several years and is very risky, as Felipe was saying.
Definitely. And I think that, we've been lucky enough to have Mike Lee from Alpha Food Labs on before. I know, Gaëlle, you were talking about your work with them, and there's so much there. So I'm trying to parse out, I want to touch on everything, but we just don't have the time. But this idea of creating a market for crops and creating market for regeneratively grown things, rather than expecting regenerative agriculture to be able to meet the needs of, this huge scale and these 4, as you said, these 4 crops that make up a huge portion of our global diet. I just wanted to really reiterate that, because I think it's so important. And there are some really great organizations who are doing that I love. I would love to shout out, like Simply Foods. Sorella Harada has been on our series before. Dr. Bronner's is doing really exciting work. They're making chocolate bars now because they were using palm oil in their products, and they were like, what else are you growing? And their farmers were saying cocoa and cacao, and so now they're making chocolate bars. It's like this exciting work is really starting to manifest in companies that are doing great work. So anyway, everyone check out the work that those companies are doing. So we have some great questions in the chat that I want to get to. We're running out of time. This conversation is going so well. I wish we had 2 more hours. But one that I'd like to address is from Marcos, and they're asking, based on your experience, what are the planning methodology and tools that you recommend from a design perspective on design processes, projects, and activities that are circular to achieve sustainable and regenerative goals? So kind of on that planning and design side, what kind of goals are you setting? And how do you start that process? And then the second part of their question is, what are indicators and metrics that measure if the system that you've developed actually achieves circularity? And I'd like to also extrapolate it to regenerative as well, because I think we have other questions about measuring regenerative in the chat. I think because you're both experts and your organizations are experts in this sort of design thinking, kind of helping people understand where to get started, how to set yourself up to go down this road, and then how do you measure your success, because those business imperatives and being able to measure and show improvement are so important. Do either of you want to hop on this one?
I can start.
Thank you.
A good one, of course, is there's a lot to mention on that, but I'll try to be brief, which is very challenging for a Brazilian, to be honest. But basically, so how we kind of perceive that as reNature, because we're really involved mostly on the biosphere side of the SDGs, like in terms of the soil, water, but also like CO2 and so forth. So like we're really defining regeneration success by measuring the outcomes of indicators such as biodiversity increase, soil health increase, and soil health can of course have multiple layers, from fauna and flora, but from water holding capacity and so forth. But we're really looking at the ecosystem services that particular landscape is providing as a key kind of like metric for us to define the success of that landscape regeneration. So biodiversity, water, carbon, and soil health. And then once we kind of see that there's ultimately a positive outcome from these indicators, we can really define a success in terms of the environmental benefit for that particular landscape. But we also do that for the social perspective. We use FAO tape methodology, which is a very effective agroecological tool for us to measure successful social impact of projects. And we have been using that in multiple projects across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. And it's a very interesting tool to actually really, mitigate certain risks such as child labor, also women empowerment, also a decent income from farmers. In Brazil, in the Amazon, for example, we worked with indigenous communities which has abundant to harvest, to do like a sustainable harvest from the remaining forest on the rubber. And they have stopped because Michelin in the past was offering very low prices, and it was not feasible for them to actually continue doing a rubber harvest from the standing forest. So all the social impacts is as important as environmental ones to actually have a ultimately overall regeneration success rate for any kind of regeneration project. So that's how we perceive, as the and of course the economic as well, but then it's not really the ultimately regeneration success that we define. Is mostly the environmental one and the social one as well.
Thanks so much. Gaëlle, do you want to touch on this as well? I can also restate the question if that might be helpful.
No, I think
you got it. You got it.
It's quite a clear question. I mean, I can just like throw out a bunch of tools and see, you can all check them out. And I would start obviously by like the one that we have in the report in the Big Food Redesign. It's called Circular Design for Food. So we have a framework where we kind of explain what are the 4 like selection and sourcing opportunities. So as like procurement team or as product development teams, you look at these 4 opportunities. So it means it's essentially like, can you use in your recipe more diverse ingredients? Can you use ingredients with lower impact? That means plant-based or perennial pulses, for example. Can you use upcycled ingredients? So when I say upcycled, don't only think about the byproducts of your own production, but also, for example, like coffee cherry that is usually left to rot on the field is great to make flour. Cocoa fruit pulp is a great sweetener. So like parts of the crop that we usually discard can be used. So things so more diverse, lower impact, upcycled, and all regeneratively produced. So that's one tool. Another tool, when it comes to packaging, we have something called the Upstream Innovation Guide that gives you a lot of examples and different strategies to think through packaging to be more circular. I think I promise I don't have stake in the business, but I think using tools like the one How Good is offering it's actually a really great. I'm sure there are several in the market. It's a great design and reform relations, innovation, renovation tool to understand quite quickly the potential impact of your recipe. So you can like put in ingredients and see straight away, like, oh, I need to change to this. And in more long term, I think an exercise that every company that would be great that every company does is looking at their ingredient portfolio and setting strategies for their biggest, or the ingredients with their biggest impact. So if we think like wheat is one of the 4 crops that I was talking about earlier, can you think, okay, within this time frame we'll reduce our amount of wheat in our products by 50% and replace 50% of our wheat by other ingredients that fulfill the same properties, and the remaining 50% will be grown regeneratively. So having very clear targets would definitely help on the way to get there. And yeah, like all the metrics, I'm not going to restate them. I totally agree with Felipe's ones.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we're getting toward the end of our time together. I want to give us kind of a chance to wrap up a little bit, for each of you to talk a little bit about what is next for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, what's next for reNature, and also, if you'd like, just for fun, if you've had any like really interesting sustainability kind of targeted ads on your social media recently. So for me personally, I keep getting targeted for the Lomi countertop composter. Anyone else? It's like $600. It's beautifully designed, but they are really they really think that I need to buy this countertop composter. So anyway, either of you can start. Gaëlle, you seem like you're getting a kick out of my composter, so I'm going to go to you next.
I love it. I don't think I have I don't notice, sometimes you get on Instagram, they ask you like, did you notice an advertisement in your feed the last 2 weeks? I'm like, no, did you put some ads? So I'm not a good customer for that. I think what's next for us is, so we launched a report, in September, we've disseminated, we talk about it a lot with companies. I think what we want is for every ideal, one of our metrics is that in the canteens in food companies, people are talking about designing products around nature. They're talking about using this circular design for food framework. That would be an amazing KPI for us. And what we're actually trying to figure out what is the most impactful activity for us to do next in the next 3 years. So we're building our strategy now. We have a few really cool ideas. I can't talk about all of them, but How Good might be involved in one of them, if we manage. But thinking about how do we push innovation? How do we create a safe space for companies to pilot, to innovate, to try this new buying models, to try communicating the benefits to consumers, to train their teams. I think that's what we want to be, is the provider of this space for collaboration and innovation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Felipe.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Leah, also for setting this up. Really appreciate this opportunity also to exchange amongst great people and inspiring organizations that is driving the transition towards a circular and regenerative economy. And so, yeah, indeed, from our side, we have 2 very exciting things coming up from reNature side. One is our big, hairy, audacious goal of reaching 2% of total farmland and 2% of total farmers around the globe in the transition towards regenerative agriculture. And the 2% number came from the inspiration of Ratan Lal, the soil scientist, saying that by increasing 2% of soil organic carbon, we can actually mitigate our climate crisis. And this is a super powerful statement, and that's why we use the 2% BHAG on farmland transition and farmers. So this is the foundation, reNature Foundation side of things, which we launched a Patreon campaign to receive donations from individuals and also corporates to support us on reaching that BHAG. And then the second one is the Impact Dashboard, which is a spin-off ag tech of reNature, which is a platform to actually monitor all the potential outcomes, regenerative outcomes of the interventions we're doing with farmers. So we can really track the data of the environmental, social, and economic performance of projects. And through that platform, we can also do insetting of the corporate's impact. So for example, if Nespresso wants to do insetting of their emissions in their own coffee production farmers, then we can do that through the platform as well. So it's very exciting time also to use technology to improve regeneration in the landscape. And I'm sure How Good and reNature can work together very closely also to with this organization. Yeah, really excited about the upcoming period and also for having more discussions like this.
Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan on a personal level of both of your work. For all of you out there who are on LinkedIn, if you don't already follow Felipe, follow him. He does great work and does a lot of wonderful writing on LinkedIn that he shares. And Gaëlle, definitely go out and follow and read that big food redesign report from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Keep an eye out for the work that they're going to be doing. Big things and like wonderful, just brilliant thought coming from both of you and both of your organizations. So thank you so much for being here. This is our last session in the Regenerative Procurement series. I'm so glad that I got to close it out with the two of you and with our audience. Keep an eye out for our next series, which should be coming in late May. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Gaëlle.